Well, friends, it's hard to believe it's already back to school time and we're already through the month of July. So we're going to take a quick peek back through the month of July and look to see how Lubbock's real estate market fared out. And good news is we had strong buyer activity again for the month of July with more than 500 homes going under contract. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. We're going to look at the four things we typically look at: market overview, buyer activity, listing inventory, and interest rates. Let's start with the general overview. As I just mentioned, 524 homes going under contract in the month of July. The reason this is significant is that it's a slight uptick from the month of June. Normally, as you get further into the year, you see the buyer activity continue to gradually trend down. That was not the case last month, in a month when interest rates were actually ticking up. So that's really encouraging. Also, as I mentioned before, you have to go back to 2021 to find where you had more than 3 months of more than 500 homes going under contract. So while we're not seeing that level of activity when we're in that hardcore sellers market in 2021, we are seeing strong buyer activity, up 12% over July of last year. Number of homes closings is also up a little bit, 5.5%, or a little bit about 5% compared to July last year. We're up 3% year to date in closings, which means we're tracking a little bit higher than what we did for 2020 in total units closed if our current trends hold. Along with that, median home price and average home prices continue to tick up as well. Average home price now up 4% year to date, despite the increased pressure on home sellers to remain true on their pricing. I've got some more thoughts on that in just a moment. Average days on market still is taking a little bit longer than it did last year, an average of 55 days for the homes that closed in July to go under contract from list date to under contract date. It's an increase of about 11% year to date. So let's take a look at the under contract activity. As I mentioned earlier, you have to go back to 2021 to see this level of activity that we've seen this year with this many months, 4 months now in 2026, with more than 500 homes going under contract. As you look back last year, we're outpacing the activity correspondingly. And so that's encouraging news to see buyers still engaged with the rates still up a little bit more than where we were earlier in the year. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. The inventory has ticked up. Even though the buyer activity was a good month for us in July, inventory ticked up to 1,600 homes. In fact, pushed up close to 1,650 at one point before coming back down. Has been hovering right around 1,650 for the last week or so, or excuse me, 1,600 for the last week or so. But we are still seeing the normal seasonal increase in listing activity, listing inventory. And if you look back to last August, you'll see that we're around 1,650. So we seem to be trending similar pattern to where we were this time last year in terms of the amount of homes on the market in Lubbock County. As you look at mortgage rates, I referred to this just a moment ago, they've been trending up and ticking up despite the Fed holding steady on the prime rate. Interest rates ticked up a little bit more with the various economic news that came out around that same time. Starting off this week, that's actually around 6.69% nationally, and so a little bit higher than what we ended July. And it's still lower than we were this time last year, which is good. But as we mentioned last month, it doesn't feel as good because we were closer to 6% in February, and to see about a 0.5% increase just doesn't feel as great. Three key takeaways so far from this market is the buyer activity is up. The buyers are still engaged, which is good news, but they're still being very patient and very picky. Listing activity is also up, which is still keeping pricing pressure on home sellers. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that the average home price is up. I think part of that is driven by new construction because we have seen a fair amount of new construction homes going under contract, with buyers being more aggressive on pricing and incentives to buyers. Rates continue to adjust. They bounce up and down a little bit, hovering around that 6.5% range now for the past few months. No one expects any significant moves one way or the other, especially down as we go into the end of the year. Most likely hold somewhere where we are, with a slight possibility, depending on how the economic news comes out each month, in terms of whether or not they'll tick up a little bit more. As always, if you have specific questions, we're here for you. You can just message us and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. We're in a strong market, but it also is a very strategic market for home sellers, as you have to be very, very smart about how you price, prepare, and position your home for the market. Buyers, sellers are offering some great incentives. Builders are offering great incentives. So now it's a good time to explore home buying if you feel like it makes total sense in your financial picture to do so. Again, if you have any questions, reach back to us. We appreciate you watching, and we'll talk to you soon.